Hello, UTVA board members and admin. I am excited to show you what my students and I have been doing to prepare for the ACT this year. I'm Rachel Bellamy. I teach 11th grade English or American Literature, and 3 of the 5 sections for the ACT are heavily dependent on my course. So it's a very large focus. I focus on English reading and writing skills. This is what we've been working on. My goal was to have the students really own the content from the beginning, and particularly own their own learning and be aware of the progress they're making or should be making. So I had regular self-assessments throughout the semester with students analyzing their own data and units that tied directly to the standards that they were analyzing. Their score, they would break down their score by standard and analyze the areas in which they needed to improve and the areas that they did well in we would celebrate, and then we'd make sure to highlight those areas that needed improvement in the content that we were learning throughout the semester. And then I've also given them some choice in what they're learning this semester. Obviously, there are standards we need to cover, but I have given them an input on what areas they feel like they need to improve the most in based on the data that they've gone through all semester from first semester. And then February is English and Reading Skills Month. I call it English and Reading Skills Month instead of ACT Prep Month for those who have already taken the ACT or who are going to choose not to take it, so they don't give me any guff. These are, important skills they need in life, regardless of whether or not they're taking the ACT. The tools we've relied most heavily on are USA Test Prep as a testing prep platform, and then English and Reading Skills Data Tracker, which I created myself, and this is part of what it looks like. So the regular self-assessments that I had students take were in USA Test Prep, and we started with just a 25% actual test length size for the English skills assessment as our benchmark assessment for the beginning of the year. And this is some sample data from one of my A+ students. So she started out scoring really well in punctuation conventions, usage conventions, sentence structure information, and topic development, but she wasn't as high in organization, unity, and cohesion, or in knowledge of language. After having assessed and recorded their scores, students were asked to set goals for the areas in which they needed improvement and how they're going to do that. A list of resources listed by domain was provided for them to choose from, and individual time in class as well as small group time was set aside to focus on improving our English and reading skills. Or in this case, for phase 1, just the English skills. For phase 2, we moved on to include reading skills as well. They took a second assessment that was also a 25% of the actual length of the ACT test for reading, and they could compare their retake, now that they've taken it twice, to their original. And in cases like this where the student didn't improve in all areas, in fact she digressed in most areas, then the student reflects on their testing environment and what might have been different this time around compared to the first time, if they had less sleep, if they rushed through the test just to get it done, if they didn't eat lunch that day, if they took it in a public place versus at home, if they had a quiet environment, etc. So we take that into account when assessing scores, but we certainly have the students go back and look at the questions as well to figure out if it was the question itself that they didn't understand or what have you. They then set more goals and identify the areas in which they're lowest so that they can improve both in reading and in writing. And then for phase 3, which was just last month, we took each assessment again, the reading assessment and the English assessment. The reading assessment this time we did 50% of the actual test length because 25% was only 10 questions and 50% was 20 questions, but with the same amount of reading passages. So I felt like it gave a more accurate idea for where the students were at their reading level. And I'll address that further later on, but as you can see, the student ended up making some more progress the third time around for her English skills, and she improved in some areas for reading skills, but not all. So she set some goals there for what she's going to do to improve for phase 4. And then phase 4, originally I was going to have them take the assessment again during finals week, but it seemed like a bit too much, so I'm going to align it with the interim assessment for this semester instead. So it's coming as part of our ACT prep unit, and we will take a full 100% of the actual test assessment for English and for reading. All of these assessments were taken in USA Test Prep, which has some very accurate uh, test questions that are aligned to what is typically seen on an ACT test. This is the data for the class, as you can see, for each phase of the assessment. Um, it was interesting to see the scores dip in the second reading skills assessment because the test was a bit longer, but the overall score did improve by 1%. It's improvement. It's not much, but we'll take it. And then the English skills improved by 3% overall, which was really exciting to see. I know our overall goal is to improve by 5% from last year. And I haven't taken this data to compare it to last year yet, but it's looking like if we're improving 3% just from the beginning of the school year, that odds are pretty good that we'll improve 5% from last year. What I've been doing to help them improve the scores beyond just using the resources that they set in their goals was directly aligning the content that we go over in class and the assignments that we do to standards on the ACT. So for example, towards the beginning of the semester, students wrote a memoir, which was teaching them narrative writing as a warm-up to getting into informative and argumentative writing, which are tested on the ACT. And they had to revise their memoir. Students often have a hard time revising their own work because they think that it's perfect the first time, right? But in this case, they realized, they had a chance to focus specifically on punctuation because there's a lot of dialogue in memoirs. It gave them that chance to focus on grammar that they don't see in something that would be more argumentative or informative. So it highlighted the grammar and punctuation side of the English assessment, as well as helping them practice for writing. I've also been doing some spot the error daily warm-ups and vocabulary Fridays, where we focus on the Merriam-Webster website has a word of the day that we check out the word, check out the definition, look at examples, and then practice writing our own sentences using that word correctly. And then for reading, we've read To Kill a Mockingbird as well as some short stories, both of which have had assignments to go along with them that help students analyze characters, which addresses some of the standards that are tested in the ACT, including defining and understanding relationships, both between characters and symbols, and also analyzing textual evidence to see, the author's purpose, etc. We also had an interesting project called the Social Solutions Project, which addressed writing more directly, but it did also give students a chance to assess mentor projects before they came up with their own project. We looked at some public artists and their projects, namely Candy Chang and JR, who did some interesting and somewhat controversial projects that were art projects displayed publicly, and it gave students a chance to analyze both the art and the execution of the project itself. Then we focused on writing with our social solutions issue. We have daily writing prompts in class, even if it's not something strongly academic. Occasionally it will be an argumentative prompt, but even if it's just something fun, I make sure the students are writing a paragraph every day. Students who think that they hate writing will always write these paragraphs because it's kind of disguised as fun social interactions, and they don't realize it's really just practicing their writing. And I particularly, with the argumentative ones, try to choose topics that are meaningful to the students so that they can practice their argumentative skills without it being too daunting to them. For the social solutions unit, we wrote an informative piece on a social issue that the students identified in our school, and then we wrote an argumentative piece in the form of a proposal proposing a solution to that social issue that students had identified. So we practiced both informative and argumentative writing. And then this week I've given the students a chance to give me some feedback on what they would like to focus on for our English and reading skills unit as our ACT prep for February. Most of them were surprisingly interested in vocabulary when I first asked on Wednesday. And then today in class I had them do a poll, and it turns out they're actually more nervous about the test itself and wanting some tips for how to succeed there. So we certainly will focus on that. But ACT writing and vocabulary are going to be a heavy, heavy focus. I will certainly address editing and English grammar, but editing is a tougher one to do in a short setting because they don't have very much time on the ACT. So rather than going back and revising heavily, I'll focus on setting up for success so that they can get the most bang from their buck from their first draft, and then using the time left over on the time test to go back and revise with the time that they have left. So that's what we've been doing. Coming up for the ACT prep unit, we'll do a full 100% of the actual test, reading assessment and English assessment via USA test prep, both in class on different days, simply for logistics. And then we're going to focus on the lowest scoring areas, which were sentence structure and formation, and word meanings and word choice. And then, of course, I'll go over ACT testing tips and what to expect the actual day of the test, which I think largely affects students' scores, being prepared for that and knowing what to expect. And then individual work time and small group work time in class as needed.